Hi, guys, and welcome back to the Carla Gericke Show. Today is episode 9, where we will be continuing from our fascinating, scintillating conversation about school choice and education in New Hampshire with some of my favorite friends. We do Thanksgivings and Halloweens and all of that good stuff together. People I actually deeply admire. I think they're smart. They have really innovative and interesting ideas about how we can make New Hampshire's education landscape better. So for part 2 and episode 9 of the Carla Gericke Show, it's my great pleasure to welcome back Ian Underwood and Jody Underwood. Thanks so much for joining me, guys.
Thanks again for having us.
All right, so we recalibrated, and there are just a few things we want to talk about before the time. So the first question, which I will throw out to Ian, is why do we have schools?
I think that's an awesome question that nobody asks, and if you think about it, we have them because they were a solution to a problem we had, which was scarcity. At a certain time, it was difficult to get books. Even if you had money, you couldn't get them. It was difficult to get other materials, like people couldn't afford chalkboards, chalk. It was hard to find people who could teach you things like how to read. And so it made perfect sense to say what we'll do is we will concentrate those in one place and have all the kids come there. If you think about it, it's basically the same idea that was behind video arcades. Who could afford to have a pinball machine? Who could afford to have, a Pac-Man console? We'll all go and share those things. Now, of course, the idea of a video arcade, except as a historical curiosity, is ludicrous. It's like you have access, what you have at home is so much better than what you're going to have in an arcade. And that's also true of schools, right? That if you have a internet connection and a smartphone, you are a few clicks away from anything that anyone has ever known about anything. And when you go to a school and are locked in a room with an adult who graduated at the bottom of her class, you actually have fewer resources than you had at home. So this is a solution. Schools are a solution to a problem we don't have. We have the opposite problem. It's not, oh my God, where am I going to get a book, right? I'm not Abraham Lincoln. I have to walk 5 miles to borrow one book. I'm more like, oh my God, there's 200,000 people who want to teach me fractions. Which one should I choose for free?
Right. We're spoiled for choice at this
so I
stage.
think this is one of the things. I like to go back to first principles, and this is a first principle thing. Is the idea of putting kids in tin cans and sending them to brick enclosures, is that a solution to a problem that we actually have? And I would say it's not, and as long as we pretend that it is, like by saying, oh, hey, let's build a better prison, That's my problem. I mean, although, yes, I'm involved in setting up a charter school, it's like, okay, you're not really addressing the problem here.
Right. So let me play devil's advocate for a hot second and say that it seems to me that most parents who do send their children to public schools are not necessarily doing it for the schooling, but kind of doing it for this notion of daycare, right?
That's absolutely true. And so in that sense, you could say school is a solution to the problem that parents need to go to work in double-income families. But when you phrase it that way, it becomes immediately apparent that this is not something that's really, it's not, if you wanted to do daycare, this isn't the way you do it. And if you wanted to do education, this isn't the way you do it.
And I'm just going to do a plug for this one radical notion that I've heard over the years, and I hear so many things, so when it sticks and I remember it, it's worth something. And that was, because we have created this model of the dual income family, where generally speaking, the lower income spouse is literally only earning the exact or close to amount that the other parent is paying in income tax for the federal government. Another solution might be to say, well, maybe we don't need that federal income tax. Maybe we could have more intact families. Maybe we could give people more choice. We don't have to send them to these brick-failing places in order to create the childcare. But assuming that all of that is not magically going to happen overnight, let's talk a little bit about charter schools. A little bit about the options that are out there.
Sure. So options. I mean, there are many options, right? I mean, But there's still a problem with many of the official options. So you could open a charter school. Sorry, not a charter. Let's start with private. You can open a private school, but you still need permission from the state in order to do that. And so therefore you have to jump through some pretty big hoops in order to get a private school going.
Actually, they're pretty small hoops and they're way high up. If they were like big hoops, then nobody would care.
Fair. I mean, they have to teach certain things. They have to keep you in your seats for a certain amount of time and so on, right? Okay. And there's also, the law that says in New Hampshire that that kids through 18 have to actually be in school. It used to be 16, and now it's 18. And talk about, it is a prison for kids who just don't find this the right thing for them. So you have private schools, but another public option is charter schools, and there's state funding for that. So that reduces the town level burden, which I really like. Then you have these newfangled terms that COVID brought us. You've got learning pods, you've got micro schools, you've got, and I'm sure there are other ones as well. Learning pods, it turns out right now, the state of New Hampshire has funds to support those, at least for the next year or two.
And what is that?
A learning pod, it's 5 to 8 kids.
Okay.
And there's a tutor that guides them. It is very screen-based, so parents who don't like screens don't like these pods. Mm-hmm. If they use Prenda, but you could do your own pod. You could do it in a different way, but Prenda is the one that the state supports.
Okay.
And they have trained people who, it's individualized and so on, but it is a lot of screen-based, and it's for younger kids. I think it's through 8th grade.
Okay.
But K through 8.
And then what is a pod?
That's similar.
And am I going to live in one and eat insect gruel, and that's how it's going to work?
If that's what you would like to do, we will support that.
I do not want to live in a pod. I do not want to eat insect gruel, and I will not like it.
This is a learning pod.
Okay.
This Prenda thing is a pod, but then I said micro schools.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
And honestly, I don't even know the full definition of that. I don't think they're state approved.
Okay.
It's a parent decides to have kids at our house or his house and teaches them, and it might be through a co-op, right, where other parents switch it up. There are creative ways to do this, but in these cases, you're officially homeschooled. So that gives you lots of options when you're officially homeschooled. So we have learning clubs, right? Like Latitude Learning, mm-hmm. which is in Derry now, yep. I think, right? And you have Big Fish in Dover. And these kids are officially homeschooled, but they I don't want to call it an unschooling model, but it's close to that. They don't follow curricula, but they help kids move forward. They do bring teachers in to teach certain things. I don't know how they individually choose what things to teach, but it's supposed to be around student interest in general.
Okay. And I know, Ian, that's a big thing you like to focus on, is this sort of notion that people, kids need to learn. So let me stop there for a second. So one of the complaints we hear, right, is that there's no parental involvement, right? And then once parents started getting involved, it seemed like, well, some people didn't really like that much either. Once your federal government starts to involve parents domestic terrorists, it seems like, some lines are being drawn, right? But one of the things I've heard you say over the years is kids, you can't make a child learn, right?
So these two questions that I like, any talk or presentation I give, I like to bring up these two questions that almost nobody ever asks. And the first one is, if a kid wants to learn something, who can stop him? And if a kid doesn't want to learn something, who can make him? And the answer to both of those is nobody, right? And especially, it's never been truer now, where the kids are learning things and you don't even know they're learning them, because here's the internet, here's my computer. I get on and somebody's teaching me whatever, how to play the violin, how to cook a croissant, how to whatever.
How to harvest a chicken.
Right?
Yep.
So if you want to learn this, you'll learn whatever you want. And if you don't want to learn something, I can give you a computer, I can bring in special aids, I can redesign a curriculum, I can do whatever I want, and you're not going to get it, which is sort of the explanation that I have for that famous Cato graph. It's like there's a certain percentage of kids who are going to school and they want to learn something, and they're going to learn whether you help them or not. And there's another percentage of kids who aren't going to learn no matter how much money you throw at them or what you do to them. And so you're just seeing that stay constant over time.
While costs are going
go up because we keep trying things to make kids learn things that they're not interested in. So yeah, those two questions, I think, if people really stopped before they did anything, before they said, what kind of tax should we have? How much money do we need? How fair does it have to be? If they stopped and said, what can we do about kids who don't want to learn? And you realize the answer is nothing, and you could just go back to spending, $1,000 per kid to do nothing. And then it really does become a daycare thing, where maybe you put them in daycare until they're ready to learn, and then they go over to the school. So of
course, what we've learned over time is that kids learn differently, right? Like we sort of had this one size fits all model, but we know, as simple as in my lifetime, people have switched from, 2 + 2 = 4. If you're into Orwell, sometimes it equals 5. But I'm a visual learner. Like I like to have things up where I can see them, and other people learn in different ways. And so if we had this more choice model, you also allow maybe, like someone like Louis, my husband, who's extremely smart, right? Like in South Africa, I think there are like 10 students who get straight A's. Like you're on the front page of the newspaper if you get straight A's. Wow. It's not like that anymore, right?
Great inflation.
Yeah, and he had, and he had an extra class, so he had like 7, and everyone else had 6 kind of thing, right? But he hated school. He could excel at it, but he was bored out of his mind, and he was like, I was learning because I could take the test, but I wasn't engaged or interested or any of those things, right? So we have that whole spectrum and it's not to say that the kid who won't learn is not smart or not capable of doing some amazing stuff. It's just the model we've created for that person isn't working. All right, that being said, let's talk about your charter school.
Sure. So, we have a I don't want to call it radical, but I will.
Yeah, you hear it first, folks. Radical school.
a pretty radical idea for how the school should work. It's funny. We're even thinking about when should it start? Should it be next September or the September after, depending on time and how long it takes? And
can it start on a day in March?
Exactly. And that's what we came up with.
Oh, sweet.
Yes. I was like, it's going to open when it's ready to open.
April 1st.
Yeah, there we go.
April Fool's Day.
I like that as an idea.
Embrace it.
That's right. And so the idea is, then I still wear 2 hats. So I am on the school board in Croydon, and one of my legal responsibilities on the school board is to make sure all the kids in Croydon are getting an education. So they really don't have much of a choice for high school. They have, Newport Montessori, half of our kids go to Newport Montessori.
Oh, wow.
And then they all go to Newport, just about. You could go to Sunapee, but the parents need to provide transportation, and that gets in the way. They don't all have it. It's the daycare thing a little bit too, but if we focused on high school to start with in the area, we'd be offering Croydon kids a choice, and it would be open to anybody because it's a state-funded charter school. So Newport would then have a choice, even though they have all the K-12 grades. They provide them. They can't have town tuitioning, but they can go to a charter school. So if we start opening a charter school in the area, we're providing choice for anybody in the area, Goshen, Leominster, whomever. So I really like that idea. But what we want to do is, so here's an interesting thing. So the state provides, what's the number? It's around $7,600 per kid, right? Give or take.
7,000 plus.
7,000 plus, and it depends on who you are, blah, blah, blah. And all the charter schools that have opened already in New Hampshire need to find extra funding because they're doing a pretty traditional model of school. We don't want to do a traditional model. What we want to do is, look, as you get older and learn to read and learn to figure out how to learn by yourself, the less you need somebody to come in and teach you. So then people's arguments are, well, if you want them to learn math, like if they're interested in geometry or trig or calculus, you're going to need somebody in. I'm like, yeah, we'll bring them in if that's what the kid needs. But once. We don't need a full-time calculus teacher.
So like plug and play teaching.
Yes, exactly. It's contract level teaching. And maybe we have a group of kids who want to learn it. If it's just one, maybe we figure out something else. And if it's just one, you can teach that kid for what they're ready, as they're ready. If it's larger, it's harder, right? And so you can move them along. We had some friends who had kids who were homeschooled in elementary level, but they only had to do school 4 hours a day. they could play the rest of the time and do whatever they wanted. I think the same thing's going to be true here.
And of course we know, for those folks who trust the science, that play is actually extremely important for, creating well-rounded, smart, adjusted, balanced children, right?
And creative on top of that. And thinking and
right.
Yes. And so then we have the idea of our graduation requirements are going to be that you demonstrate, and maybe Ian, maybe you should talk about this, but that, so Ian has this idea for a test called I-cubed, and so the idea is if you can pass this test, you have shown that you are not illiterate, these are the 3 I's, right, I-cubed, you are not illiterate, you are not innumerate, and you are not irrational.
Oh, so from the previous episode where I was talking about the rationality. Right. So it's, again, just to repeat, so it's I-cubed, and it's
to show that you are not illiterate, innumerate, or irrational.
So that you can read, do math, and think.
Yes.
Right.
All right. I like it.
And that actually is based on going back to what the Supreme Court, the way they turned Article 83, the New Hampshire Supreme Court, they turned Article 83 on its head and said, you have to provide an opportunity to be educated, and they actually came out and said, this is what we mean by that. And really, if you look at the rest of the Constitution in conjunction with that, so it turns out an important part of the Bill of Rights in the New Hampshire Constitution says that I can only take your money or property in order to protect your other rights. Okay, I can only infringe on one of your rights to protect your others. And so, again, looking at what is the purpose, not of schools, but of education, right? The purpose of education is to protect everybody's rights. And if you're running around with people who can't read, write, think, understand a statistical argument, who can't notice a Ponzi scheme when it's being showed to them, who can't read a statute or a judicial opinion, then your rights are in danger because those people can be induced to vote your rights away. Right? So
and one might argue are induced to do so, and that is kind of where we are now, right?
Which is interesting because it leads me to a point I wanted to bring up earlier, which is when you look at the Second Amendment to the Constitution, right? And it uses a certain kind of wording, which is interesting. The U.S. Constitution. And it uses this interesting wording, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, right? It's saying, look, this is why you want people to be armed, so they can be free. It turns out in Article 83, Part 2, Article 83 of the New Hampshire Constitution, it says knowledge and learning generally diffused throughout a community, being essential to the preservation of a free government. They're parallel, right? And so this, to me, when I hear people talking about what kids deserve or it's like nobody looks at the right to keep and bear arms and says, oh, that's a thing we have to give to you. And furthermore, it's not a thing government should be
funding,
involved in.
Right. Yep.
Because the purpose of it is for you to be able to resist government overreach, and education is exactly the same. And as long as we look at it as an entitlement, a thing we have to give people, and then we put the government in charge of educating children so they can resist the government, that's insane. And so to me, this is one of those sea changes you have to make, which is you have to start seeing education as your responsibility. It's your responsibility to be educated. It's not my responsibility to educate you any more than it's my responsibility to arm you.
Right. So I think in the New Hampshire Constitution, the word is actually cherish, right?
Well,
and that's like one of my
part.
You
will cherish seminaries and public schools
in that order.
In that order, and also because I do know people use it, in the wrong context. But to me, first of all, it's like one of those words that I just love. It's just kind of like a nice little word, but it also to me just denotes, this is something we should appreciate because there's downstream value to people being able to think that benefits all of us. But now we've sort of created this reverse model where we are basically not educating people and creating a mob that will then vote to not educate more people, right?
Right,
And to
yeah.
put the powerful and the people who really want to control other people to kind of elevate them. And so in many ways, school choice is actually the desire to level the playing field, to really to take the elites down a notch, to take the establishment and to say that, you know what, you don't have the right to control us. We want people to think and to be able to write and all of that. So if you're someone who's really looking at these issues from an egalitarian perspective, it is actually more equal to make sure that everyone can think properly, or not even
critically.
think critically. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for, right? So it's not what to think. It is teaching people the tools of how to go about thinking.
That's right.
Right?
Right. So, and I want to just remind people that charter schools are publicly funded. So when people are like, oh, you just want to create charter schools to get rid of the public schools. It's like, but it is
It's a public school.
And then they're like, well, let's fix the public schools. It's like, they've been saying that since the 70s. When do you stop saying that?
Yeah, and honestly, and maybe that's even something we can talk about, a lot on the show. I have this desire to reform, because I always say, look, we can reform or we can burn it to the ground. These are your options, right? So I would prefer not to have to burn things to the ground, right? But to leverage all the time and effort and everything that's already gone into it. But that means people have to have an appetite to change. And we can't talk about this like a little bit here on the sides, right? Like, we really need to be aggressive about it. So one of the ways that we can be aggressive about it is getting more thinkers on school boards, right?
Yes.
So
First call to action.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a collaborative effort across a number of organizations to recruit thinking school board members to school boards around the state. We just spent a lot of time updating all the information we have about school board members and when their terms are up. And this is a collaboration between the 603 Alliance, the School District Governance Association, I'm on the board of that, GenCourt Mobile, which is the data center, and some other people too. I'm probably not mentioning everybody. And so what they're doing,
and there's like the Moms for Liberty,
Yes.
that Rachel Goldsmith, who was on the show a few episodes ago.
That's right.
So definitely it feels like there's a mobilization.
There is. People are out there. And so I encourage anybody who wants to help change schools, and you can make small changes on your own school boards, and they can get larger and larger as you get more people who think like you on the boards. Let us know you want to run, and we can find help. 603 Alliance is doing a training for how to campaign. SDGA is doing a seminar on, what date did I tell you? January 24th.
Yep.
For what it means to be on a school board, just the ABCs to let you know whether you want to do this or not. And that's just before you have to sign up to run. And then after the elections, we'll do another one that gets a little deeper into how to be on a school board, what the responsibilities are. So that's the first call to action. And then, can I segue?
Yeah.
Yeah, the second call to action is to get people who want to create these new learning environments around the state. We need them in New Hampshire. Any of them, right? Learning clubs, pods, private schools, charter schools. And the interesting thing about a charter school, if we get our charter, then it's actually easier to expand to other charter schools. If you want to replicate in another part of the state, well, we already got the approval, so you can do that.
Oh, neat.
It is.
So you can almost create
Cancer
branches. All right, well, let's go with a more positive model than anything that has to do with cancer or viruses or replicating variants of any sort.
Right.
We're more like, you can have ice cream in every town.
We won't use words like metastasis.
Stop. Right. So I mean, right now we're just doing a free. If you are a free stater and want to do this, it'll expand out to other groups as well. But right now we're doing a meetup, a virtual meetup Friday night, and the announcement is in the FSP group on Facebook. So if you can get there, you can find this to try to create this network of support to help people do this. Because a lot of people are interested, but they don't have the right team. And we want to help set up those right teams and provide experience to people who want to do these
And
things.
actually, I think, and this will be a broader sort of issue, I think we're going to run out of time again soon. This is so much fun. I could have you guys on every week. Is this sort of strategic notion notion. You know, we as Free Staters and the Free State Project, we're growing, right? Because totalitarianism is good for our business. The more corona fascism we see, the more people who are critical thinkers across the country are looking for solutions. And based on, you know, this being the freest state in the nation, and starting to really see the fruits of our labor, right? Like, a lot of us have been doing this work for a long time. We chose New Hampshire as our forever homes. And so we need to become more strategic, build out those teams, get people in. If you're watching this and you're not per se a Free Stater, but you're sort of someone who's pro-liberty, you're someone who's concerned about the direction, the way things are going, the loss of our rights, this sort of notion that the state suddenly seems to think that they own us, literally own our corpuses. Clearly for thinking people, that's pretty unacceptable. So we really want to create these strategic models, new policies, think about the bills, and be innovative. And for folks who are naysayers and the criticizers out there, just remember, we're the people who are on the side of liberty and freedom. And if you're not on the side of liberty and freedom, I think it's really important to maybe flip that around, and maybe you can sit with it a little bit and try and figure out if you're against people making better choices for themselves in life, and you hate Free Staters and you hate freedom and you hate liberty, then what are you about? Because you might want to do some deep soul searching. So just to wrap up, we have the 603 Alliance is coming up on the 18th. That will be to see if you want to run for school board.
That's actually campaign training.
I'm sorry. Then the SGDA on the 24th of January will have a program.
ABCs of school boards.
ABC of school boards. You can always find out more about the show, the Free Staters, and all of that. Go to fsp.org/calendar. You can find all my stuff at carlagericke.com. It was my great pleasure to have you guys. I want to have you. You should just co-host my show, Ian, from time to time. I love the philosophical discussions, trying to think these things through and come up with great solutions that are great for Granite Staters. So I will see you guys again next week. Thanks for tuning in.